Welcome to the Times of Israel's daily briefing. Today is Sunday, July 20th, day 653 of the war. Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. Hi, Manny. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Amanda.
In parallel with stepped-up negotiations in Qatar for a ceasefire hostage release deal, this morning the IDF announced it would begin operating in an area of Gaza it hasn't yet entered. So Manny will fill us in on Deir al-Balah and what else is happening on the ground in Gaza. Last week, the IDF mistakenly shelled a church in the Strip, leading to international condemnation and a visit into Gaza by the Latin Patriarch. This comes, of course, amid more accusations of killings near humanitarian aid sites. So Manny will try to untangle this as well. And the IDF was freely operating in southern Syria again last week to, as Israel says, protect the Druze minority in that region. So we'll hear more about this and much more when we're back. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. The Israeli military said this morning that it was set to begin ground operations in Deir al-Balah for the first time since the start of the war in October 2023. So Deir al-Balah is one of the few places in the Strip where the military has not yet operated with ground troops because it believes Hamas was holding hostages there. So, Manny, there are a couple of scenarios here that makes this new operation possible. One, of course, is that it's a threat, not a promise. But can you spell out some of the scenarios that now allows the IDF to enter this region?
So indeed, hostages were held in Deir al-Balah. We saw that during the release in February, Hamas freed from Deir al-Balah Eli Sharabi or Levi and Ohad Ben Ami. There was the ceremony in Deir al-Balah for that release. So we can say without a doubt that hostages were held there. It's possible that, under one scenario, that hostages are no longer being held there, and this allows the army to then operate in this part. The evacuation order, if you sort of look at the map, it's not all of Deir al-Balah, it's just the southwest part of the city. It's still a part of the city itself, but not the entire area. So it is possible that the army knows that there are no hostages in this specific area, and therefore it sort of allows itself to operate there without risking the lives of the hostages. Of course, Hamas has said that it would execute captives if the IDF approaches them. We saw this happen in Rafah previously. The other scenario which I could think of is that hostages are perhaps still being held there, and the army maybe it's not really intending to act upon this, but this is just a threat to Hamas, part of the hostage negotiations, to try and pressure the terror group into agreeing into a deal, into a ceasefire and a hostage release. Because Deir al-Balah is an area where the army has not yet been in. It is an area where Palestinian civilians are sheltering. In all of central Gaza, according to previous estimates, around 350 Palestinians were residing in that area. It's relatively built up, meaning that buildings are still standing there because there's been limited airstrikes in this area, both because of civilian sheltering and because of hostages being held there. So it could just be a threat to try and pressure Hamas into a deal, or Israel may act upon this in the coming days.
And it's also quite possible that the hostages that were held there are now dead. We don't have that information, of course, as well. And so what is happening on the ground in Gaza in general? I know there's a lot of tunnel demolition going on still, but last time we spoke, you said that the IDF had demolished about a quarter of the tunnels under Gaza. Is there any kind of revised figure now?
I haven't seen a new figure just yet, but I don't think it's gone beyond that really since then. There has been demolitions of tunnels. We saw this morning the IDF announced that it demolished nearly 3 kilometers worth of tunnels in the Jabalia area, and there was another demolition that took place in Bet Hanun. A kilometer here, a kilometer there, but I don't think we're anywhere close to even getting to half of the tunnels in Gaza. But it's definitely something to ask the IDF to follow up on. They haven't been very consistent in telling the public how much of the entire tunnel infrastructure in Gaza has actually been demolished. But operations are still ongoing. We saw over the weekend the army announced that it carried out strikes on around 90 targets in Gaza over the previous day. the usual cells of operatives and caches of weapons and other infrastructure and tunnels as well. But the main focus of ground operations, from what I understand, is Bet Hanun still, the northern Gaza city, Jabalia, Gaza city itself, mostly the eastern neighborhoods, meaning Shaja'iyya, Darj, and Tufah, and even Zaytun, which is slightly deeper into the city. And there are also operations ongoing still in the Rafah Khan Yunis area, but less intensive. It's mainly focused on northern Gaza right now. But things could, of course, change with this possible central Gaza operations.
Right. And what kinds of forces are now in the Strip? We hear reports that part of the paratroopers are going to move out into the West Bank, for example, and we hear other reports of this nature. So who is in the Strip right now? Is it mostly combat engineering? Who's there?
So there's 5 IDF divisions in Gaza, spread out across the whole Strip. But it's important to note that they aren't really full divisions, meaning they're normally operating with maybe 2 brigades or 2.5 brigades sometimes. And the army moves forces around depending on sort of the intensity of the operations and where they're needed. And normally the army doesn't really disclose how many soldiers are operating in Gaza at any given time. It's, of course, information that Hamas can use. I mean, we'll talk about this soon, but the army also sent troops up to northern Israel to handle the incidents ongoing on the Syrian border. And even one of the divisions in Gaza was ordered to prepare to potentially move up to the northern border. I don't think that's going to happen in the end, but they were, briefly taken out of Gaza and told, be ready to potentially go up north, but now they're being sent back in probably to Gaza. So it's very dynamic, the amount of troops, but still we're talking tens of thousands of forces, a lot of combat engineers as well, because of all the tunnel demolition work.
Okay, so on Thursday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office issued a statement expressing its regret after an IDF tank fire killed 3 civilians in Gaza's only Catholic church. And this came after U.S. President Donald Trump pressured Netanyahu's office into making this apology. And the PMO said Israel deeply regrets that a stray ammunition hit Gaza's Holy Family Church. Every innocent life lost is a tragedy. We share the grief of the families and the faithful. After this announcement, there was a visit of the Latin Patriarch into the Gaza Strip, which was very interesting to me, though I hear from our diplomatic reporter, Laser Behrman, that this is actually not such a rare occurrence, that the Latin Patriarch has been in several times during this war. But Manny, can you break down what actually happened in terms of this errant fire?
So according to the army and its investigation into this incident, a tank operating in the Gaza City area fired a shell, and due to certain circumstances, it's not fully clear yet, but part of the shell, I would say, bounced off, or the fragments from it, not the entire shell, but debris from it, or shrapnel from the shell, hit the church. And we saw images showing that a small section of the roof of the church, sort of next to the stone cross on top of the building, was missing, and there was some damage also to the windows. But in general, the building is standing still. There's no major damage inside the building, and we even saw photos, of course, from when the funerals were held inside the church afterwards for the 3 people who were killed. It's not fully clear how these people were killed. I don't think they were inside the building because there's no real damage inside. It's likely that they were outside and hit by the shrapnel that sort of exploded from the area, but the damage is not hugely major. I think it's important to note, and we're not talking about an airstrike or anything, or a drone strike or anything of that kind. We're talking about a single tank shell that was aimed at some other target and hit that, or maybe missed that target, and then shrapnel from that hit the church. So sort of a secondary explosion there.
So, as I mentioned, the Latin Patriarch visited the church after this happened, and that kind of pours salt into an open wound for all journalists who wonder when international media can do reporting from the Gaza Strip. And so the question, of course, is why is the Latin Patriarch being let in, whereas journalists cannot be let in? Because there's so many open questions, including the question of the killings near aid distribution sites. We are hearing, of course, again, dozens reportedly killed near these aid distribution sites. And then we hear from the IDF that no, it only fired warning shots. And even the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation was saying that there are no incidents or fatalities there, for example, yesterday, and that it has repeatedly warned people not to travel to its points in the dark. So this is, of course, a question. It's such a tangled narrative right now. We have reports from Hamas media, from the Hamas health ministry, that there are these fatalities, and yet there's no international reporting or no verification, no actual way to find out what is happening here. So what is the IDF saying yet again?
So the army, since the beginning of the war, has not allowed journalists to enter Gaza and do sort of what they want in Gaza. That's always in an sort of an escorted visit with the army. I wouldn't really call it embedding, because they're really only short visits of several hours to specific areas where the army wants to take journalists to. And sort of since the beginning of the war, there's been even high court cases on this. And the army has said that it doesn't want to allow people in because it can't promise that they'll be safe by just sending them in, and it doesn't want to be a taxi service for these journalists by taking them in and securing their entry and then leaving them afterwards. With the Latin Patriarch, it's a bit different because he's a single person, and of course a very significant person, and he's been allowed in many times since the beginning of the war, and the army knows where he is, and it can conduct a whole operation to ensure his safety and pause operations in those areas. And it's possible to do it for a single person like that, but not for if hundreds of journalists now want to enter Gaza and walk around in areas where the army doesn't know where they're going or controlling. That's the army's logic behind it, but it does allow anyone who asks. If you go and ask the army, can we go into Gaza to see a certain area, they will take journalists in. I've done this myself several times. I've asked the army, can I go visit the Netzarim corridor, and they've allowed this. But I will add on top of that that the army has not yet taken journalists to the aid sites. And I know there have been requests by, not just by us, but by many other journalists as well, both to the army and to GHF, to allow journalists to come and see the distribution of aid and what happens overnight. And of course, every night we're hearing these new reports of people being killed. But the army hasn't approved any of those requests just yet. I really hope that does change, because right now there's quite a battle of narratives here, with Hamas, of course, saying that civilians are being killed at the aid sites, and GHF saying that it's not at the aid sites themselves and they have no responsibility, and the army saying it's firing warning shots. So it would be quite a good thing, I think, for everyone to have independent people on the ground to actually report what's going on.
Okay, let's go to a short break. And we're back. I'm Amanda Borschel-Dan here with our military correspondent, Emanuel Fabian. So Israel is preparing to send medical equipment and medicine to a hospital in the Druze majority city of Sueda in southern Syria after days of violence have left an estimated 900 people dead. The announcement came even as fighting persists across Sueda since last Sunday, despite the latest attempts from Syria's Islamist-led government to restore order following a U.S. brokered deal to avert further Israeli military intervention. So, Manny, let's talk about this Israeli military intervention. What has been going on in southern Syria?
So it's been actually calm for the past day or so, but what began last week was there were clashes between Bedouin and Druze in the Sueda area in southern Syria. It's a Druze majority area. And Israel has, of course, previously vowed to protect the Druze in Syria because of their ties to the Druze in Israel. And during these clashes, the Syrian government deployed its forces to Sueda. They say they were trying to break up the violence, whereas Israel and the Druze as well accused the Syrian government of actually participating in the attacks on them. And in response, Israel then began to target Syrian forces, bombing their convoys that were heading to Sueda, and then later ramping up to actually hitting Syria's military and defense ministry headquarters in Damascus. Then in the background, there was a lot of pressure from the US to try and get Israel to stop this bombing campaign against the Syrian government. And eventually on Friday, an Israeli official said that Israel would allow Syrian government forces or internal security forces to deploy to Sueda for the next 48 hours. to allow them to try and restore order, which is essentially Israel backing down from trying to bomb their convoys heading into Syria. And during all of that chaos, we saw that on the Israeli border, Druze residents of Israel, mostly of the Golan Heights, but also Druze from other areas in Israel, like the Galilee region and the Carmel region, they basically protested on the border and breached into Syria. And we saw more than 1,000 Israeli Druze head into Syria. Some of them returned, some of them went in and out again a few times. Over the weekend, we saw violent protests on the border, and several dozen Israelis entered Syria. Many of them have since returned but we actually don't know how many actually remain on the other side. And also, we saw the other way around. So Syrian Druze actually entering Israel, mainly from the Khadr area. It's a Syrian Druze village that's very close to the Israeli border, where basically Syrian nationals, Syrian Druze entered Israel. Some may remain in Israel. It's unclear actually how many made it in, how many were sent back. Police said that they sent many back, but it's all quite chaotic in that area. But to be honest, in the past 24 hours, as we're talking now, basically over Saturday, we didn't see any major incidents in that area.
So this medical equipment and medicine is going to a hospital that's actually still standing, though badly damaged, in the southern city of Sueda. And that means forces are going to come in with all of this equipment and medicine, or is it being sent through some kind of civilian methods? Do you know?
I don't know exactly, but I do remember previously when Israel sent aid to Druze in Syria, what they did is the IDF opened the gate, and some civilian organization with these trucks with aid basically drove through and then unloaded it onto trucks on the other side, and then those trucks then drove it to where it was supposed to go. So I'm assuming it will be some sort of method like that. We won't see IDF soldiers driving all the way to Sueda, which is dozens of kilometers away from the border. The army is only operating up to 15 or so kilometers. It has provided aid to Druze villages that are close to the border, but anything deeper will likely require some sort of mechanism where the aid is offloaded onto other trucks and then those are driven into the Sueda area.
Now, this is almost more of a diplomatic question, but as you mentioned, Israel is, quote unquote, allowing the Syrian government to operate in the southern province, and the clock is ticking. And do you see any kind of possibility that once the clock runs out, the sands fall in the hourglass and the Syrian government is still there, that Israel will begin operating again in this province?
I'm not certain. I think that this could be actually an opening to some sort of a deal, maybe, with Syria, where, I mean, we don't know exactly what's going on right now. Apparently there's a ceasefire, but there are also clashes ongoing. So the two ways where I see this is that if the clashes are still going and Israel is accusing Syria of participating in the clashes, Syrian government forces of participating in these clashes and attacking the Druze, then we'll see Israel resume its strikes. But if and I hope, for everyone's sake, that this ceasefire holds and Israel sees that the Syrian government forces are not participating in attacks on the Druze, then this will likely sort of calm down, and it may even open up this possibility of some sort of ties between Israel and Syria, which, of course, was talked about before these clashes took place. There was ongoing diplomatic talks, but it's a little bit out of my realm. But I think as far as the army is concerned, they're going to wait and see whatever the Israeli government tells them to do regarding the situation there.
And the other big takeaway, at least for me, is how porous the border is between Israel and Syria. And of course, there is now this buffer zone, but the very fact that dozens, hundreds of Israelis, or citizens or not, but Israeli Jews are coming in and out pretty much freely is a bit startling, shall we say, Manny?
Well, I'll put it this way. Israel's border fences are meant to keep people out, not in. So it wouldn't be the first time that people have crossed into Syria, especially in that area. There's just a gate there. It's a gate that's next to Majd al-Shams. It's within a few meters of the actual town itself. It's not very hard to go up to the gate. And if you're hundreds of people and there's only a few soldiers, to push the gate wide open and walk into Syria. The army, on the other hand, is very good at looking towards Syria and making sure nobody's approaching from that side. Of course, it didn't manage to do that because of all the chaos on the border at the same time. But that's just the nature of these fences. They're very good at preventing people from entering. Not talking about lots of people. If it's a single person trying to, or a small cell of people trying to attack, then it can. But leaving is another question. That's why we also have seen in cases in Gaza where Israeli civilians have crossed into Gaza through open gates, basically, because the army's looking the wrong way, also in Lebanon and in other areas as well.
All right, Manny, lots to think about here. So thank you again for your insights and nuance today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Times of Israel's Daily Briefing. Please check out another installment tomorrow. This episode was produced by the Podwaves. If you have any questions or comments about this or any other episode, please drop us an email to podcast@timesofisrael.com. Until tomorrow, shalom.